All right, let's get this print shop rolling.
Oh, I like that.
Well, maybe not a literal print shop,
Yeah.
but get ready for a deep dive into printing technology.
All right.
It might not sound as flashy as the latest AI thing everyone's talking about, but trust me, the stuff we're going to talk about, it powers so much of what you see around you every day.
Yeah, it really does.
I've got the Q excerpts, all about the tech behind print and digital media.
Okay.
We're going to break it down so you can choose the right paper for your project, or figure out why the colors on your screen always look different once you actually print something, or even start to appreciate those super glossy magazine covers a little bit more.
We interact with printing every single day without even realizing it. You think about it, the book in your hand, the label on anything you buy, it's everywhere.
Okay, so first, printing methods. I recently tried to print photos at home. And they came out so blurry. Total disaster.
Sounds like you might have used the wrong process for the job. There are actually a whole bunch of different printing technologies. Each one has its own strengths.
I see.
For example, you've probably heard of laser printing. It's super common in offices.
Right.
It's fast, efficient, great for big reports you need quickly.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I definitely wouldn't use a laser printer for my photos. I guess that's where inkjet comes in.
Exactly. Inkjet is all about those vibrant colors and fine details. Perfect for, vacation photos or art prints. Plus, they're pretty affordable these days.
Oh, okay.
So you can get professional-looking prints right at home. Next time you're printing photos, inkjet is the way to go.
Good to know. But what if I wanted to print something huge, like a concert poster? How do they even make prints that big?
That's where wide format printing comes in. It's used for all kinds of things. Giant billboards, banners you see at events.
Wow.
Basically, it's printing, but supersized.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I've always been curious about screen printing. That textured look you get on T-shirts and posters. Very artsy.
Yeah, it's got a very unique feel. And what's cool about screen printing is how versatile it is. You can print on fabric, ceramics, wood, even metal.
Wow.
So if you're feeling crafty, it opens up a lot of possibilities for DIY projects.
Might have to try that. Okay, now let's talk about offset lithography. I always hear that term, but I don't really get it. Isn't that the classic printing method they use for books and magazines?
That's right. Offset lithography has been the standard for mass production for a long time. What's really interesting is it actually played a big part in making books more affordable. Imagine if every book was still hand-copied. Access to knowledge would be so limited.
That's true. So offset lithography is actually responsible for spreading knowledge.
In a way, yeah.
Pretty amazing. Okay, last one. Solid ink printing. This one's a bit of a mystery to me.
Solid ink is all about vibrant, high-quality graphics, and it's actually pretty eco-friendly because it uses less waste than traditional ink cartridges.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you're looking for really great color and you also want to be environmentally conscious, solid ink is worth checking out.
Okay, so we've got laser, inkjet, wide format, screen printing, offset lithography, and solid ink. A lot of options. But before I get completely overwhelmed, let's talk about color. Why do colors sometimes look so different on screen versus in print?
The age-old battle of RGB versus CMYK.
Yeah, I've had so many printing disasters because of this.
Basically, it comes down to the way colors are created digitally versus how they're reproduced with actual ink.
Okay.
RGB, which stands for red, green, and blue, is kind of like mixing light.
Gotcha.
Your computer screen uses those three colors to create every color you see.
So my screen is like a tiny light show.
Pretty much. Now, CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. That's all about mixing ink. Think of it like painting. You're layering those colors to create the final result.
So RGB is light, and CMYK is pigment.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does this affect my prints?
Well, because those two color systems work differently. What looks amazing and vibrant on your screen in RGB might end up looking dull or just off when it's printed in CMYK.
Uh-oh.
And this can be super frustrating, especially for designers, because they really need to make sure their work looks exactly the same, both on screen and when it's printed.
So is there a way to avoid these color mishaps?
The key is color calibration. It might sound technical, but it's really just making sure your monitor and printer are speaking the same language in terms of color. Think of it like tuning your instruments before a concert.
Oh, okay.
Without calibration, you might end up with a visual cacophony.
So calibration is like the conductor of the printing orchestra, making sure all the colors are in harmony.
That's a great way to put it. And while it's really crucial for professional designers, anyone who wants their prints to match what they see on screen can benefit from calibration. It's like having a superpower that makes sure your ideas translate perfectly into the physical world.
Okay, now that's a superpower I can get behind. Speaking of perfect colors, I've got to ask about Pantone. I always hear designers using that word, but what is it exactly?
Pantone is like the holy grail of color matching. It's this system used across industries to guarantee consistent color, no matter who's doing the printing or where. Imagine you're a big company with a logo that has a very specific color. You want to make sure that color looks exactly the same on every single thing you print, right?
Right, consistency is key.
Exactly. That's where Pantone comes in. They've assigned a unique code to each color, so designers and printers anywhere in the world can reference those codes to ensure perfect color matching.
That's so helpful. No more color mishaps.
Ah!
All right, let's try to decode some industry jargon.
Yeah.
For example, I've never understood what bleed means.
Bleed is all about creating professional-looking prints without any borders. It basically means extending your design a little bit beyond the edge of where the paper will be cut, so that even if the cutting is a tiny bit off, you don't end up with any white borders.
Sounds like a safety net for those tiny cutting errors.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
I never knew that. But how much bleed do you usually need?
That's a great question. Usually designers add about 1/8 of an inch of bleed on all sides, but it can vary depending on the project. It's something to keep in mind when you're setting up your files for printing.
Okay, got it. So bleed helps avoid those annoying white borders.
Ugh.
And it's something to keep in mind when I'm designing.
Okay, what about gutter? It sounds kind of unpleasant.
Don't worry, the name isn't that glamorous, but it's a simple concept. The gutter is just the space between columns of text, or the inner margin where two pages meet in a book.
Okay.
It's there to make sure the text doesn't get lost in the binding or the folds.
So it's all about making sure the text is readable.
Exactly. Now let's talk about registration marks. You know those little crosshair symbols you sometimes see on printouts?
Yeah, what are those for?
Those are registration marks, or like guides for the printing press. They help align the different color plates during printing so that all the colors line up perfectly to create the final image.
So they keep everything in order. That's right. Now, let's move on to something that a lot of people find confusing, especially when dealing with both print and digital images. Resolution.
Ah yes, DPI versus PPI. I know they both have to do with image quality, but I always get them mixed up.
I can explain that. DPI, or dots per inch, is all about print resolution. It measures how many tiny dots of ink are packed into each inch of your printed image.
I see.
So basically, the higher the DPI, the more detail and sharpness you'll see in your print.
So if I want a super crisp, high-quality print, I should aim for a higher DPI.
Exactly. But keep in mind that higher DPI also means larger file sizes, and that's where file compression comes in. It helps reduce the file size without sacrificing too much quality.
Okay, so it's a balancing act. What about PPI?
PPI stands for pixels per inch, and it's all about screen resolution. It determines how many pixels are displayed per inch on your screen. It's like the digital equivalent of DPI.
So DPI for print, PPI for screen.
Right.
Does file compression come into play with PPI as well?
It does, especially with images you see online. You want to find the right balance between the image looking good on screen, but also making sure the file size isn't so big that it takes forever to load.
That makes sense. Nobody wants to wait for a blurry image to slowly appear. All right, last thing, paper. There are so many different types of paper. How do you choose the right one for a project?
Choosing the right paper can make a huge difference in how your print turns out. Two key things to consider. Paper weight, which is measured in grams per square meter, GSM,
Okay,
and opacity, which refers to how see-through the paper is.
gotcha. GSM for weight, opacity for transparency. But how does that help me choose the right paper for, say, a business card?
Okay, so for a business card, you'd want a higher GSM, something that feels sturdy and substantial when you hold it.
Right.
And you also want good opacity, so that you don't see any of the printing from the other side showing through.
Okay, so high GSM and high opacity for a business card.
Exactly.
Makes sense. What about something like a brochure?
For a brochure, you might choose a slightly lower GSM, so it has a more flexible feel.
Okay.
Opacity is still important, especially if you're printing on both sides. But you have a bit more flexibility depending on the design and the paper texture.
So paper choice is about finding the right balance between the weight, the opacity, and the look and feel I want for my final piece.
That's a great way to put it.
What about glossy paper, like what they use for magazine covers?
Ah, that glossy sheen comes from a process called calendaring. Basically, the paper is pressed between rollers to smooth and compress it, which creates that sleek and shiny surface.
So they polish the paper?
Kinda, yeah.
Cool.
And just like all the other printing techniques we talked about, understanding these seemingly small details can make a big difference in how your prints look. It's all about knowing the tools of the trade.
I feel like I'm learning a whole new language.
It is a lot to take in.
This is fascinating. But it's a lot.
Don't worry, we're going to break it all down. By the end of this deep dive, you'll be navigating the world of printing like a pro.
Okay, I'm ready for more.
Great.
Let's do it.
All right, welcome back. Ready for more printing adventures?
Whoa, absolutely.
Good. Because we're going to talk about how some of this techie stuff actually works in the real world.
I'm ready. We covered a lot in the first part,
Yeah.
but I'm curious to see how it all comes together. Like, how do you actually use these techniques when you're creating something for print?
Okay, well, let's start with resolution. You know, DPI and PPI, there's this neat trick called photo reduction. It basically lets you shrink images down while still maintaining their quality.
Photo reduction. That sounds kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, that is a cool idea.
Sabine has a cool name.
But seriously, why is that important? Can't you just resize an image in any photo editing software?
You can, but it's not always that simple. If you just shrink an image without using the right techniques, you can end up with a blurry, pixelated mess.
Ah, I see.
Photo reduction is all about resizing intelligently.
So it's like shrinking strategically,
Mhm.
not just making the image smaller. Exactly. You're trying to preserve just the right amount of information so that the image still looks sharp and clear, even when it's smaller.
That makes sense. Okay, what about printing on both sides of the paper? I know it's good for the environment,
Hmm.
but are there any other benefits?
You're talking about duplexing. It's a great way to make your documents look more professional. Think about it. Would you rather have a huge report with a ton of single-sided pages or a sleek double-sided booklet?
The booklet, for sure. It just seems so much more organized and easier to handle.
Exactly. Plus, you save paper, which is always good. Speaking of professional-looking documents, let's talk about camera-ready copy.
Camera-ready copy. It sounds so official.
It is pretty important.
But what does it actually mean?
It basically means the final, perfect version of your document. The one that's completely ready to be printed. No changes needed.
So everything is finalized.
Everything. The layout, the text, the images, the colors, all approved and good to go.
Like giving the printer permission to start printing.
That's a good way to put it. It's essential for avoiding costly mistakes and delays.
Yeah, I can add it. Nobody wants to have to reprint a whole brochure because of a typo.
Right. So camera-ready copy is really about precision and communication. It's about making sure everyone is on the same page, literally, and that the final printed piece will match the designer's vision.
I'm starting to see how all these techniques and terms we've been talking about, they all fit together to actually create those printed materials we see every day.
It's like a behind-the-scenes look at how printing works.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much thought and skill goes into something as simple as a printed page.
I know, right? Okay, so we talked about resolution, duplexing, and camera-ready copy. What other printing secrets do you have?
Let's talk about paper finishes. You know how some papers are smooth and glossy, and others are more textured and rough?
Yeah.
That's all about the finish.
Right, like a matte photo versus a glossy one. They look and feel totally different.
Exactly. Choosing the right finish can really elevate your printed piece. For example, a glossy finish is great for making colors pop, and it creates a luxurious feel,
Uh-huh.
while a matte finish can be more subtle and sophisticated.
So glossy for vibrant colors, matte for a more elegant look.
Yeah, something like that.
Are there any other finishes I should know about?
Oh, tons! You've got textured finishes that mimic fabrics, like linen, or felt embossed finishes that add raised patterns, and even metallic finishes for a bit of sparkle.
There are so many options. It's like choosing an outfit for your printed piece.
That's a great way to think about it. Just like with fashion, different finishes create different moods and styles.
This is so cool. I never realized how much thought goes into choosing the right paper.
It's all in the details. And speaking of details, let's talk about something people often overlook. Font choice.
Fonts. I thought that was more of a design thing, not really related to printing.
Fonts definitely play a big part in design, but they can also have a big impact on how your printed piece actually looks and feels. Yeah. Different fonts have different personalities. They evoke different emotions. Like a bold, sans-serif font like Helvetica, that might feel modern and minimalist,
Okay.
while a more delicate serif font like Garamond could feel more classic and elegant.
So it's not just about whether the font is easy to read. It's about setting the tone and mood of the whole piece.
Exactly. And, just like with paper finishes, choosing the right font can really elevate your printed piece.
I'm learning so much today. I'm starting to see printed materials in a whole new light.
That's great to hear. And the best part is, now you can use this knowledge to be a more informed consumer and a more creative maker. You can start to appreciate all the thought and craftsmanship that goes into the printed pieces you see every day.
And if I ever decide to create my own printed masterpieces, now I'll know where to start.
That's the spirit. Ready to go even deeper.
Absolutely. Welcome back for round 3. You know, it really is amazing how much we take for granted when it comes to printing.
It is, right. We just flip through magazines, read books, look at flyers, never really thinking about all the work that went into making those things.
Something you said earlier really stuck with me about printed materials offering a sensory experience. Like, it's so true. It's not just about what you see. It's about the feel of the paper, the weight of the book in your hand.
Yeah.
It's like you physically connect with the content somehow.
Right. In a world that's so dominated by screens, there's something really grounding and tangible about actually holding a physical object.
Absolutely.
Think about the difference between like reading an ebook and holding an actual book in your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Both are great, but there's a different kind of connection you get with a physical book. Turning the pages, feeling the paper, even the smell of a new book.
I love that new book smell. And I've been thinking about what you said about font choices, how they can set the tone and mood of a printed piece. The fonts have personalities.
They do.
It's kind of wild.
A well-chosen font, it can really make a design stand out. And it creates a kind of subconscious connection with the reader. It's all about finding the right match between the message and the visual language.
I see. I'm never going to look at fonts the same way again.
Speaking of design, I've always wondered, how do they make those super intricate, layered designs you see on some printed pieces?
Ah, you're talking about things like embossing, letterpress printing, and foil stamping.
Okay, those sound fancy.
They're specialty printing processes. They add texture and dimension to the design. So embossing creates raised or recessed areas in the paper, gives it a tactile quality.
So you can actually feel it.
Yeah. Letterpress printing uses these plates with raised lettering to create an impression in the paper, gives it a really classic vintage look.
Okay.
And then foil stamping. That adds a metallic shine to certain parts of the design, makes it look really luxurious.
It's like adding jewelry to a printed piece.
Exactly. Those little embellishments can really elevate a design.
This is all so cool. I'm realizing that printing is so much more than just putting ink on paper.
It's like a combination of art and technology,
It really is.
and it takes so much attention to detail.
Yeah, and I hope this deep dive has inspired you to maybe take a closer look at the printed stuff you see around you, appreciate all the work that went into it. Next time you pick up a magazine, run your fingers over the cover, notice the fonts they used, see if you can spot any of those special printing techniques we talked about.
I'm definitely going to be looking out for those things now. This whole deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this knowledge can help you be a better consumer, but also a more creative person. Maybe you'll feel inspired to design your own greeting cards, or make a photo album, or even try screen printing your own t-shirts.
The possibilities are endless. Thank you so much for taking us on this printing adventure. It's been incredible.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Well, that wraps up our printing technology deep dive. We hope you enjoyed learning all about this amazing world. Remember, print is more than just ink on paper. It's a way for humans to be creative and innovative. And it's a really powerful way for us to communicate with each other. So go out there, explore, create, and appreciate the magic of print.